They say every company has a smell that tells the truth before the numbers do. Ours was a cocktail of burnt coffee, carpet cleaner, and stale ambition. The kind that coats your throat and makes even good people speak in bullet points. I'd spent 8 years breathing it in, not as a martyr, as the person who made sure the lights stayed on when the pitch decks got brave. My name is Lauren. If you ever used our platform and it didn't collapse during a holiday surge, that was me. If a client insisted they'd discovered a bug at 10:07 p.m. on a Saturday and it magically vanished by 10:21, me again. I was the person who knew where the real bodies were buried. Not in HR, but in the handoffs, the silent cues, the fragile places where vision meets cron jobs and fails quietly unless someone loves it enough to check the logs. I was not loved. I was tolerated. Like a fire door you only notice during a drill. The trouble arrived wearing a slim-fit suit and a new last name. Evan married into power and decided it fit him. Overnight, he became VP of Transformation, which in practical terms meant he renamed Slack channels, added emojis to roadmaps, and held meetings about meetings. He called our on-prem Dusty, our billing workflows Grandma Code, and our clients Replaceable. He called me Laura twice. I corrected him once. Here's the thing I learned. When insecurity is dressed in status, it gets loud. It starts brainstorming in verbs it can't define. It hires consultants to diagram the exact bridges it will soon burn, and if that fails, it invents urgency. The calendar invite landed at 3:41 p.m. No subject line beyond quick sync, HR, no agenda, no context. Dispatches like that don't come with questions. They come with choreography. I closed the ticket I was triaging, pushed my chair back, and took the long way around the floor. People looked busy the way people do when they're afraid to make eye contact. The office plants had more water than our runbooks. Inside the HR glass box, Evan sat on the table's edge like he owned gravity. His tie was loosened just enough to suggest he had somewhere more important to be. Probably a mirror. Beside him, our HR manager, Sonia, held a branded folder like a priest with a pamphlet. "Lauren," he said, finally getting it right. "Let's keep this efficient." That word, efficient. It's what you say when you're about to ruin someone's week and you want to sound like a spreadsheet. "We're restructuring," he continued, flashing teeth that never learned discretion. "The company is moving in a bold direction, and some legacy roles no longer map to the future." Legacy. I've learned that in corporate dialect, legacy can mean history, stability, and the very backbone funding your bold direction. But today, it meant me. Sonia slid the folder toward me. I didn't open it. You don't need to read the last page of a book if you've already survived the plot in other languages. "We truly appreciate your service," she said softly. Service. Like I'd been bussing tables, not preventing a catastrophic double-charge rollout by writing a guardrail at 2 a.m. and emailing a thank you to a junior dev who spotted the edge case I missed. I let the silence expand until it became a room we all had to sit inside. Evan broke first, tapping his watch. "If you could hand in your badge, laptop, and—" "Evan." I set the badge on the table, face up, the way you leave a key on a kitchen counter when you know you're not coming back. "Congratulations, you're terminated," is how you wanted this to sound, right? Clean, final, victorious. He blinked, confused, like a dog hearing its name in a different accent. "I'm not here to break anything," I said evenly. "I'm done fixing the things you broke." He smirked, reflex more than thought. "We'll be fine. We have a migration plan." Of course they did. It was a Canva flowchart that looked excellent at 300% zoom and dissolved on contact with reality. The plan assumed authentication would behave like a brochure. It assumed our invoices would reconcile across environments through sheer charisma. It assumed that the person who'd been manually stitching together bad decisions with careful scripts would always be there to stitch. "I've spent years documenting what could be documented," I said. "But there are things you only learn by waking up at 4 a.m. to listen to a system breathe. You can't outsource heartbeat." Sonia's eyes flicked to me. Human. Worried. I liked her in that moment. Not because she could stop anything, but because she knew she couldn't and still wished she could. I stood, folding the severance letter without looking at it. "You have exactly 10 minutes before the system fails," I said, calm, like reporting tomorrow's weather. "Say hi from me to your father-in-law and wish him luck." Evan's smile stalled. "Excuse me?" "10 minutes," I repeated, not because I pulled a plug. Because I stopped holding one. The patching runs that kept your shiny experiments from corrupting billing? Mine. The fallbacks that caught the API when you turned off the old endpoint before turning on the new one? Mine. The compliance alarms you silenced last quarter because they were negative energy? They were warning you, not me. He glanced at Sonia, then at the badge. I watched the math crawl across his face. Arrogance is fast. Comprehension is slower. Panic, though, that one sprints. "This is a threat?" he tried. "It's a reminder," I said. "Gravity works whether you believe in it or not." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The office hum pressed in, the printer clicking, a distant laugh that didn't know better yet. The AC pushing cold air onto cold shoulders. I slid the laptop across the table, turned toward the door, then paused. "Document everything from here," I told Sonia, not him. "Save your emails to your personal account. If anyone tells you not to, write that down too." Then I walked out through a maze of brand new motivational posters. Dream in iterations, speed loves courage, we are our metrics, and thought about the difference between noise and signal. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam a door. I took the stairs. On the landing between floors, my phone buzzed once. An automated ping I'd forgotten to disable. The last orphaned echo of my midnight caretaking. I watched it fade. 10 minutes isn't a long time unless you know exactly what starts gasping at 9. When you've been the invisible glue for years, you develop an instinct for the moment it starts to peel. It doesn't come with alarms or fireworks. It's smaller, like the flick of a dying light bulb, a whisper in the logs that only you hear. That's what I carried with me as I left the glass box. Badge surrendered, laptop sliding out of my hands like a body I didn't need to resuscitate anymore. I didn't head straight home. I walked 2 blocks to a coffee shop with peeling paint on the walls and tables too close together, the kind of place where no one cares if you sit for hours nursing a cup. I ordered black coffee I knew would taste burnt and a blueberry muffin I had no appetite for. My hands weren't shaking, but my chest buzzed with that low hum of adrenaline, the kind that feels like a secret trying to crawl out of your ribs. From the window, I could see the mirrored side of our office building. 15th floor. The same row of blinds I'd stared at for years during late nights when only the vending machine and I kept vigil. Now, I sat outside the glass box, watching. For the first time in nearly a decade, I didn't owe it my heartbeat. I told Evan he had 10 minutes. That wasn't melodrama. 10 minutes is how long it takes for one of my scripts. My scripts, not the company's. To realize it no longer has the permissions it needs. At first, nothing happens. The dashboards stay green, the graphs look steady. People keep sipping their overpriced smoothies, believing they're in control. But then the edges fray. A client invoice doesn't reconcile. A request times out. A queue overflows and the monitor blinks a warning that looks minor until it isn't. Most of the staff can't tell the difference between an error and a hiccup, but hiccups become coughing fits if no one knows how to clear a throat. I sipped my coffee and let the bitterness anchor me. The thought crossed my mind. Should I have left a trail? A set of instructions tucked in a shared folder? An anonymous email to the 2 junior engineers I trusted, the ones who actually asked questions instead of nodding like bobbleheads during meetings? But then I remembered Evan's smirk. The way he tapped his watch like my career was just a stopwatch to burn through. The way he said legacy as if it were rot instead of roots. I had given this company 8 years of my life. Not just time, but pieces of myself. Sleepless nights, missed dinners, birthdays where I muted family calls because a server migration couldn't wait. And for what? To be dismissed in a glass room by a son-in-law who thought Canva slides counted as innovation. Number, I owed them nothing. The first sign arrived quicker than expected. An email bounced. then 2, then a dozen. I refreshed the news feed and saw a vendor post on LinkedIn. Due to technical issues with our partner system, fulfillment operations are temporarily paused. That word, temporarily, was corporate code for, we have no idea what's happening. My phone buzzed. First, it was Sandra from finance. Hey Lauren, super weird question. Do you happen to have a copy of the Q3 reconciliation tool? Nothing's syncing. Then Darren from procurement. Lauren, are you online? We're locked out of the vendor logs. Aspen is panicking. And finally, Anna, the CEO's assistant, who once snuck me soup when I worked through the flu. I know you're gone. I respect that. But please, where are the system backups stored? I stared at the messages, thumb hovering. The temptation to reply was sharp, electric, but I didn't touch a thing. Not yet. Instead, I opened the internal status page on my tablet. The usual neat rows of green check marks were bleeding into red and yellow. A note had appeared at the top, probably written by some poor intern. We are currently experiencing a temporary disruption in service across multiple systems. Please bear with us as we resolve the issue. Patience. That made me laugh into my coffee. Patience is what you ask for when you've ignored every warning sign until the dam breaks. In the group chat where the old infrastructure team still lurked, people started chiming in. Alex. Told you it would unravel without her. Mira. I give it a day before the board wakes up. Carlos. $10 as Evan blames her on the way out. Then, to my surprise, a new name appeared. Evan himself. Hey team, let's keep the energy positive. We're all in this together. Sparkles emoji. Hashtag solutions not blame. It took everything in me not to spit out my coffee from laughing. I could picture him in that sterile conference room, sweating through his shirt, trying to paste over a crisis with emojis. Meanwhile, systems I had nursed like fragile children were collapsing in slow motion. This wasn't sabotage. That's the part no one understood yet. I hadn't broken anything. I had simply stopped fixing what they never respected enough to learn. And maybe that was the most dangerous revenge of all. Not the noise of destruction, but the silence of absence. I leaned back in my chair, phone buzzing against the table, and felt the city move outside the cafe window. 10 minutes had passed. The real countdown had just begun. There's a difference between causing a fire and walking out of a building where you've been the sprinkler for years. I kept repeating that as the messages stacked up on my phone like hail. I didn't owe Evan a bucket. I didn't owe the company my lungs. But there were people inside I cared about. Quiet workhorses who never made the slide decks. That complicated things. Darren pinged again. We can't access the vendor hooks. Is there a fallback? Sandra followed. Payroll preview shows duplicates. If this posts, we're in trouble. Anna. The CEO wants to know if there are backups off-site. He's asking specifically about legacy fallbacks. Legacy fallbacks. Funny. When I'd created that folder 2 years ago, Evan called it paranoid redundancy. I called it not letting people lose mortgages because a vanity migration went sideways. I opened my personal archive, everything legal to keep, emails I'd sent with warnings, screenshots of approvals, the signed addendum giving me ownership over the automation scripts I'd written off hours. I had the clause highlighted. My name, their counsel's signature. Evan's countersign, lopsided, like he was in a hurry. Receipts matter. Not to win arguments. Those are cheap. But to protect the people who did the work. I typed Anna back. Finally. There is an off-site backup of company data. Confluence page. Legacy fallbacks. Search within for Mirror Haven. Ask it to restore read-only access from the vault. It's company property. You're authorized. I did not mention my scripts. I did not send a zip. Boundaries are lines you draw before people try to move them. Within minutes, the status page showed a trickle of yellow bleeding back to green around the backup nodes. The invoices were still failing, but finance wouldn't bleed out today. A small, mean part of me wanted to let the entire machine seize. The bigger part wanted good people to get paid. My old team chat lit up. Alex. She's not going to let payroll crash. Told you she has a spine and a heart. Mira. Boardroomer, emergency meeting at 5. Evan pacing like a treadmill. Carlos. Vendor just posted again. Service degraded due to client-side authentication issue. Translation. They broke it. I stared at the mirrored windows across the street. For years, I imagined what it would feel like to not be needed. Turns out it feels like standing on a shore watching a tide you used to control. You know exactly which rock will be uncovered next. That's the grief and the gift of competence. Prediction. Sandra called. I almost let it ring out. Then I picked up. Lauren, I'm so sorry, she blurted. I didn't know they were... She exhaled. Look, I'll keep this short. If the duplicate payroll hits, we are in breach with 3 lenders. Do I pause the run? Pause, I said. Tell legal you did it under the emergency stop clause. It's in the runbook. Page 3, I don't have the runbook. Check the Confluence page, quarter-end guardrails. Search stopgap. It's read only, but the steps are plain English. She went quiet, then soft. Thank you. When we hung up, I expected to feel smug. I didn't. Relief came in strange shapes, less like triumph and more like sitting down after standing too long. My email chimed. A message from HR, exit interview optional. Please return any personal items. Attached was a PDF that included a line about cooperation during transition. I laughed. Transition implies a bridge. Evan had bulldozed the bridge, framed it as efficiency, and now wanted to borrow my planks. Another ping. LinkedIn. A thread from our largest logistics client, polite on the surface and furious underneath. We have suspended integrations until stability is confirmed. Our patience has limits. The comments were a slow leak of reputational damage. You can mop a floor after a spill. You can't undo the stain if no one closes the valve. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it go. Then a text. Lauren, it's Sonia. Please answer. I picked up. Her voice was low. I won't keep you. I recorded the meeting. Ours. I didn't plan to, but something in me said to hit the button. Okay. If things get ugly, you should know. Evan said the word age before you walked in. He asked if we had risk on legacy staff cluttering the culture. I told him to stop. I wrote it down. I closed my eyes. Discrimination's an ugly word lawyers spell with dollars. I didn't want to fight, but I wasn't going to run from one either. Thank you, I said. Protect yourself. Email the notes to your personal account, then print them and put a copy at your mother's house. She gave a tiny laugh that sounded like a person choosing courage. He's going to blame you. He's already trying, I know. Are you okay? I looked at my cooling coffee, the muffin with one bite missing, the window I'd stared through instead of at. Ask me tomorrow. We hung up. I breathed. Across the street, a man in a suit hustled out the revolving door. Evan. He was talking too fast to a smaller man I recognized as the COO, hands slicing the air like he could carve an outcome he liked. They stopped, mid-argument, both phones lighting up. The COO's face shifted. Anger, then something colder. Arithmetic. Evan pointed toward the building, toward the 15th floor, as if the glass could be persuaded. The COO didn't look. He turned and walked away. Another email arrived. From Board Liaison. The subject line, request for conversation. The body was 2 sentences. We'd appreciate a brief call today. Strictly confidential. Your perspective would be helpful. I didn't answer. Not yet. I opened a new document and started a list. The dates I'd warned them about license expirations. The time I wrote an emergency patch to prevent double billing. The screenshot of Evan approving the deprecation of a service without a fallback. The clause assigning my scripts to me. No adjectives, no heat, just facts, receipts. Then the screen lit up with a name I hadn't expected. The CEO. Not a text, a call. I let it ring twice, 3 times, 4. On the 5th, I tapped accept and said nothing. "Lauren," he began, voice careful. "We seem to have a problem." I waited. "Could you come in?" he asked. "Just for an hour." I looked at the building I had kept from drowning, watched a gull tilt in the wind above it, and thought about the one thing no one in there understood. Help isn't something you demand after you've called it obsolete. "Why?" I said, and let the words sit there like a mirror he had to look into. When the CEO called me that evening, I expected anger. What I got instead was something worse. Desperation disguised as charm. "Lauren," he said, drawing out the syllables like we were old friends. "We've always valued your contributions. I think we just had a miscommunication. Let's clear the air. Come in tomorrow. We'll make this right. Make this right." That phrase stuck like a splinter. You don't make things right after you've let someone be tossed aside like kitchen scraps. You don't erase a smirk in a glass box with a phone call dressed in politeness. "I'll think about it," I told him, and hung up before he could rehearse the next line. That night I barely slept. Not from guilt, though it hovered around the edges, but from the flood of what-ifs. What if Sandra got blamed for pausing payroll? What if Sonia's recording got lost? What if Evan convinced the board that I'd sabotaged the company? Reputation doesn't always bend toward truth. Sometimes it bends toward whoever shouts first. By morning, the news had already spread beyond our walls. A trade site ran a small piece. Major disruptions at Eldridge Corp. Vendors report delays. No mention of me, but the subtext was loud enough for anyone who worked there to hear. I walked to the same cafe, ordered the same burnt coffee, and opened my tablet. My inbox looked like a storm surge. Subject lines screaming, urgent, critical, need your input. Most I ignored. But one caught my eye. From Sonia. "Lauren, board meeting at 3. They've asked Evan to provide a timeline. He's blaming legacy scripts. I think they'll drag your name into it. Please protect yourself." Legacy scripts. My scripts. The ones explicitly signed over to me in black ink. I opened the folder again, checked the clause, reread the scanned page like it was a lifeline. Ownership wasn't just pride. It was my shield. By noon, another message landed. This one from the board liaison. "If you are willing to speak, we'd prefer to hear directly. Off the record. Confidential." I sat with that for a long time, tracing the rim of my coffee cup. Part of me wanted to delete it, to let the building collapse under the weight of its arrogance. But another part, the part that stayed up through flu fevers and migraines patching their systems, wanted the truth recorded somewhere that mattered. So I wrote back. "I'll join remotely. One condition, no Evan present." Minutes later, confirmation. Link provided. At 3:05, my screen flickered to a gallery of faces I'd only seen on holiday cards and glossy brochures. Suits, muted backgrounds, the kind of people who ask about culture while outsourcing it for half the price. "Lauren, thank you for joining us," the chairwoman said. "We want to understand what's happening." I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I told them exactly what I had done and what I had stopped doing. How the backup nodes were still intact because I'd insisted on redundancy. How the payroll guardrails existed because I wrote them. How Evan's modernization cut through critical failovers with no plan. I screen shared the clause, the emails, the timestamps, dates, receipts. Silence followed. Not the awkward kind. More like the sound of people realizing their investment might not be what they thought. One board member finally spoke. "Are you saying these disruptions are natural consequences?" "I'm saying," I answered, "that if you fire the person holding up the scaffolding, you don't get to be surprised when the building groans." The chairwoman leaned forward. "And your scripts? Those belong to you?" "Yes, by contract." Another pause. Then she nodded once, slowly like a gavel falling. "That answers my questions." When the call ended, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty, like after running a marathon you didn't train for. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms to my eyes until the shapes turned white. Half an hour later, my phone buzzed again. Sonia. They cornered Evan, she whispered. The COO asked why he didn't check the contracts. He blamed you. The chair shut him down. Said, and I quote, she didn't sabotage us. She just stopped saving us. I exhaled. Slow, measured. And Evan? He's rattled, but still strutting. He thinks his father-in-law will shield him. Maybe he was right. Nepotism is stubborn, but cracks spread faster than pride admits. That evening, I walked past the office building. The lobby was lit, but the 15th floor glowed dim, screens flickering like dying fireflies. Through the glass, I caught sight of Evan. Hands in the air, phone pressed to his ear, the posture of a man insisting reality was negotiable. I didn't wave. I didn't stop. The truth had already started speaking louder than me. The fallout didn't come like an explosion. It came like a leak. Slow, steady, impossible to plug once you notice the cracks. By the end of the week, Eldridge Corp wasn't just in crisis. It was unraveling. I didn't need to read headlines to know. My phone carried the evidence. Old teammates sending screenshots of dashboards blinking red, vendors demanding penalties, clients announcing temporary suspension of services on LinkedIn. What had once been polished silence now sounded like 1,000 alarms going off at once. And then there were the apologies. First, Sandra. A short message. I'm sorry for not speaking up. You carried us. I see it now. Then Darren. You were right about everything. If you ever consult, I'll fight to bring you in. Even Anna, the CEO's assistant. I wish I'd had the courage to say something sooner. Thank you for everything you did for us. I read them one by one and let them sit. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give. Not yet. Evan, of course, reached out too. His tone swung like a pendulum. First, smug. We'll fix this without you. Then pleading, just a quick call, please. I'll pay you personally. And finally, desperate. If you don't help, my marriage is on the line. I didn't respond. Some doors don't need slamming. They need to stay open just enough for the person inside to realize no one's walking back through. By Friday afternoon, Sonia called again. Her voice was steady, almost relieved. He's suspended, she said. Administrative leave pending review. The board couldn't ignore the contracts, couldn't ignore your receipts. I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. And the CEO? Quiet. Too quiet. He knows this is bigger than his son-in-law. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like watching a house you once built burn down, except you weren't the arsonist. You were just the one who stopped patching the holes in the roof. That night, an envelope slid under my apartment door. Thick, cream-colored, the kind law firms prefer. Inside, a subpoena. Shareholders versus Eldridge Corporation. My name wasn't in the defendant box. It was in the witness list. They wanted me to testify, to explain how one person had been holding the scaffolding while leadership ignored every warning sign. I sat with it for a long time. The temptation was there. Revenge in a courtroom, truth addressed in exhibits and cross-examinations. But I realized something else too. I didn't need to destroy them. They were doing that all on their own. My role wasn't fire, it was mirror. That weekend, I packed a small bag and drove north. No laptop, no charger. Just me, the open road, and a quiet I hadn't felt in years. At a roadside diner, I ordered pancakes and sat in a booth by the window. The waitress asked if I wanted coffee, and for once I said no. My hands didn't need caffeine to shake anymore. They were steady. The truth is, revenge hadn't been the goal. Peace had. For years, I'd been the invisible one. The fallback, the failsafe, the person no one thanked until something broke. And when they finally called me legacy, they didn't realize they were right. I was legacy. I carried memory, continuity, the kind of knowledge you don't buy with consultants or Canva decks. But legacy doesn't mean obsolete. It means foundation. As I drove back into the city on Sunday evening, my inbox lit up again. Among the noise, one message stood out. Subject line, consulting opportunity. A smaller competitor, Stratum Systems, had been circling me for years. They didn't send emojis or promises. Just one line. We've always respected your work. Ready when you are. I smiled, not wide, but real. Respect. That's all I ever wanted. On Monday morning, while Eldridge scrambled through another all-hands emergency call, I signed Stratum's contract. 6 months, double the pay, half the stress. More importantly, no Evan, no nepotism, no buzzwords pretending to be strategy. Just real work, done by people who cared about doing it right. That afternoon, I walked past the old office one last time. The 15th floor was dark. A printed notice was taped to the glass. Visitor Wi-Fi. Welcome one. Same password it had always been. For years, I begged them to change it. They never did. I didn't laugh. I didn't sneer. I just kept walking, the city air cool against my face. People say revenge is best served cold. Maybe they're right. But I think the real prize is knowing you don't need revenge at all. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop carrying what was never yours to hold and let gravity finish the work. And me? I finally chose peace. They didn't even use the word fired. Just a security guard at my elbow, a new manager with too much hair gel, and a single sentence that sliced through 17 years of my life. Your role no longer aligns with our forward strategy. That was it. No thank you. No recognition, not even a handshake. Just the kind of corporate jargon people use when they don't want to admit what they're doing. I smiled, nodded, and let them escort me out of the glass tower I'd walked into at 7:15 every morning for nearly 2 decades. On the surface, I looked calm, maybe even relieved. My coworkers avoided my eyes, some with pity, others with barely disguised smirks. But inside something shifted. Because while they thought they were cutting out legacy overhead, they had forgotten one detail. A single clause buried deep in the contracts, written in plain legal ink. Without me, every single operating license this company depended on was void. I kept that knowledge tucked behind my smile as I handed over my badge. It hadn't always been like this. When I first joined the company, we were a scrappy little biotech startup trying to prove ourselves. Compliance wasn't glamorous work, but it was essential. I handled the paperwork no one else understood. Federal operating permits, export licenses, medical device certifications. I made sure every shipment, every contract, every regulatory audit passed without a single red flag. 17 years later, I wasn't flashy. I didn't have Darren's gleaming suit or Madison's TikTok confidence, but I was the spine that held this whole organism upright. The one who wrote the systems people mocked as overly detailed, but relied on every single day. That's the thing about quiet people like me. We don't need applause. But when we're gone, the silence we leave behind is deafening. The firing itself was staged like theater. The new manager, Greg Whitfield, leaned against the HR desk like he was auditioning for a commercial. Early 30s, MBA fresh off the printer, voice polished by too many podcasts. We're streamlining, he said, flashing his perfect teeth. Focusing on innovation, cutting out the old bottlenecks. We need agile systems, Alice. Not rigid gatekeeper's gatekeeper. That's what he called me. I wanted to laugh right there in his face, because what he didn't realize was that I wasn't a gatekeeper. I was the gate itself. Without me, there was no entry, no approvals, no legality. But I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I just smiled, signed the paper he slid across the desk, and watched as HR stamped terminated effective immediately. As security walked me out, I remembered the clause. Section 12B, tucked into the operational compliance agreement I had written myself years ago when the company first entered regulated markets. It was my insurance policy, one I never thought I'd actually need. In the event of involuntary termination, all federal certifications and licenses sponsored by the company shall remain under the employee's name until properly reassigned and approved by governing agencies. Translation: fire me without planning and every license collapses. And Greg? He hadn't even glanced at the old contracts. That night, I sat in my small apartment with a glass of tea and the city lights spilling through the window. My phone buzzed with messages from old colleagues. Some apologetic, some nosy. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my personal terminal, inserted a secure USB, and logged into the National Licensing Database with my biometric key. One by one, I checked them. FDA device compliance. Authorized under Alice M. Hayes. Export certification ID. Authorized under Alice M. Hayes. Federal biotech handling permit. Authorized under Alice M. Hayes. 32 active licenses, all tied to me. They hadn't transferred a single one. I leaned back in my chair, heartbeat steady. They thought they'd erased me from the building. But on paper, in the eyes of the federal government, I was the building. By Monday morning, I knew chaos would start to brew. I could already picture it. Vendors sending error messages, shipment delays, internal systems rejecting new credentials. The compliance dashboard blinking red instead of green. And at the top of it all, Greg standing there with his polished smile, wondering why nothing worked. When I closed my laptop that night, I didn't feel vengeful. I felt certain. They had treated me like background noise, like outdated infrastructure. But tomorrow, the silence would roar louder than any speech Greg could give. Because here's the truth about betrayal in business, or in life. People think it happens in a single moment. A firing, a slammed door, a final word. But betrayal is slower than that. It's built on years of being overlooked, dismissed, underestimated. Until one day, the person you thought was expendable reminds you why you needed them all along. And me? I didn't need revenge. The system itself would speak for me. I could almost hear it. The hum of idle monitors, the clatter of early keyboards, the low murmur of voices before the day truly began. For 17 years, I had lived inside that rhythm. Now, the rhythm would falter without me. I didn't have to wait long. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Jules, one of the junior analysts who had always been kind to me. Something weird. Shipment to Metatron flagged. License ID not valid. They're asking who the officer of record is. I set my coffee down slowly. One license error wasn't surprising, but I knew better. If one was failing, more would follow. By 9:30, another message. 2 vendors can't process orders. Same error code. Greg told us to just update the license info, but the portal rejected it. I pictured Greg standing there in his fitted blazer, telling everyone to keep calm. He probably thought it was a small glitch, the kind of problem IT could patch. He had no idea he was staring into the mouth of something much larger. Around mid-morning, Jules called me directly. Her voice was tight, like someone trying not to be overheard. They're panicking, Alice. Orders are stacking up. Darren's in the conference room saying it's just a transition hiccup. But the compliance portal keeps spitting back the same error. No authorized certifying officer found. I didn't answer right away. I listened to the sound of her breathing, the edge of fear in it. She had always respected the systems I built, unlike most of them. Jules, I said finally, calm as I could manage. Check the federal registry. Look up who the licenses are still tied to. She hesitated. You mean, yes. A beat passed, then a soft gasp. They're all still under your name. I thanked her quietly and told her to be careful. Then I ended the call. By noon, the cracks widened. I knew because another message arrived, this time from an old colleague in logistics. We can't move inventory. Customs flagged the export certification as invalid. Trucks are sitting in the lot. Greg wants to override it, but federal portal won't allow it. My hands stayed steady, but I felt the weight of what was happening. Without those licenses, nothing moved. Not the devices, not the raw materials, not the paperwork. The company wasn't just delayed, it was paralyzed. I imagined the boardroom, the rows of young analysts shifting uncomfortably in their seats while Greg barked orders. He probably told them to stay innovative and not worry about outdated protocols. Meanwhile, every system I had built for 17 years was blinking red. That afternoon, I decided to walk. The city felt different when you weren't rushing to the office. People hurried with phones pressed to their ears, taxis honked in tight streets. But for me, there was no urgency. I bought a sandwich, sat on a park bench, and let the noise of the world wash over me. My phone buzzed again. Jules, of course. Alice, you won't believe this. The FDA showed up for the Q3 inspection. 3 auditors right in the lobby. Greg nearly turned white. They're asking for portal access. No one can log in. Darren tried your old credentials. The system flagged it as fraud. I closed my eyes for a moment. The FDA inspection. Of course, it came every year around this time. I had always prepared the team weeks in advance. Now, without me, they were walking blind into it. By 4 p.m., the story had reached me without even trying. A former coworker texted, "What did you do?" "The company's on fire." Everyone's saying nothing works without you. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That evening, I sat by my window again, the city lights shimmering against the glass. For the first time in months, I felt no weight on my chest. No deadlines, no urgent calls. Just quiet. I knew tomorrow would be worse for them. The audit report would land, shipments would stall, vendors would escalate. And sooner or later, someone higher up, the CEO himself, would return from holiday and see the wreckage. He would ask the only question that mattered. Who thought firing Alice was a good idea? I took a slow sip of tea, the bitterness grounding me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. They had dismissed me as legacy overhead, background noise unnecessary. But systems don't care about ego. Licenses don't care about charisma. And the truth was simple. I was the license. By Tuesday morning, the silence broke. My phone buzzed with 3 messages before I even finished breakfast. Vendors demanding updates. Colleagues whispering about auditors refusing to proceed. And one message from Jules. The CEO is back. He looks furious. I set my spoon down gently. I had expected this moment. Callum Vance didn't like surprises, especially not ones waiting for him after a holiday. I remembered him well. Sharp suits, sharper eyes, the kind of man who built the company by sheer force of will. He wasn't cruel in the way Greg was, but he was dismissive. To him, compliance was background noise. Necessary, but never glamorous. I had been invisible to him. Just another cog. Now he was about to find out what happened when the cog wasn't there anymore. Later that morning, Jules called me, whispering as though she were hiding under her desk. You should have seen it, Alice. He walked in with his suitcase still in his hand. No one even greeted him. The whole floor was silent. He went straight to the conference room and slammed the folder they gave him on the table. I pictured it. Callum, suntan still fresh, confidence peeling away as he opened the internal dashboard for the first time since his return. They pulled it up on the screen. Jules continued. All red. Every license marked invalid or revoked. He asked Darren what he was looking at. Darren tried to spin it as a transition error. Callum cut him off. He asked one question. Which idiot thought firing Alice was a good idea? I couldn't help it. I laughed. Quietly but fully. By noon, the damage was undeniable. The FDA auditors had left the building, filing their inspection as incomplete due to credential denial. Shipments were frozen in loading bays. Clients were calling, demanding answers. Another message popped up from a logistics manager I barely knew. We're dead in the water, Alice. Without you, we can't move a single product. Everyone's pointing fingers. Nobody wants to admit who signed off on this. I didn't reply. It wasn't my fight anymore. Around mid-afternoon, the storm worsened. One of the analysts forwarded me a screenshot, knowing I'd appreciate it. An internal Slack thread with Darren frantically typing, "Is there any way to restore Alice's license privileges temporarily?" The silence under his message said everything, not a single reply. No one knew how to fix it. No one could. The irony was sharp. Just days ago, Darren had called me legacy overhead. Now he was begging, even if only in digital desperation, for my name to be restored. I went for a walk again, this time down by the river. The water was steady, unbothered by the chaos in offices stacked with glass and steel behind me. I thought about how many nights I had spent working late, making sure every renewal was filed on time, every regulation accounted for. No one had seen those hours. They only saw the clean dashboards, the approvals that slid through without hiccups. That invisibility had cost me my job. But now, it was the very thing unraveling theirs. By evening, another message came through. This one from Graham Niles, Director of Operations, a man who once laughed openly at my color-coded compliance maps. "Alice, it's Graham. Listen, we may have miscalculated. The licenses are gone. We need you back, at least temporarily." Just to stabilize things, I stared at the text. The words blurred by memory. Years of dismissals, years of being the afterthought in meetings, years of being cut out of the big picture. Now, the same people who smirked at me were scrambling. I didn't answer. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights low, city sounds muffled beyond the glass. For the first time in 17 years, I didn't feel tied to them. I wasn't bound by their deadlines or their arrogance. But I knew one thing. Tomorrow would be worse for them. The audit report would hit. Clients would begin to back away. Investors would notice. And all of it would trace back to the decision made in one smug conversation at an HR desk. They thought they could erase me. Instead, they had erased themselves. By Wednesday morning, the cracks had turned into fractures. I woke up to 3 emails from former colleagues, all with the same undertone. Panic. One wrote that the export division had shut down entirely. Containers locked at the docks because no valid license could be attached to the paperwork. Another admitted their biggest supplier had frozen all deliveries until a recognized compliance officer signed off. The third was short, almost desperate. "Alice, if you know anything we can do, please tell us. Everyone's drowning." I didn't answer. It wasn't mine to fix anymore. Around 10 a.m., Jules called again. Her voice carried that strained mix of disbelief and exhaustion. "You should see it here. The CEO's holding emergency meetings every hour. Greg hasn't been seen since yesterday. Some say he's locked in his office. Others think Callum pushed him aside completely. Darren's still trying to make it sound temporary, but even legal is against him now. They keep saying it could take weeks, maybe months to reestablish all the licenses I stayed silent. And Alice," she added after a pause. "The board is furious. Investors are asking questions. Clients are threatening to walk. Callum actually said out loud, 'We fired the wrong person.' I don't think I've ever seen him admit something like that before." That made me laugh, though it wasn't joy. It was irony. For years, I had sat in rooms where my warnings were brushed aside, my work treated as invisible. Now, the man who never once acknowledged me in a meeting was telling the board they'd made a mistake. By afternoon, I started seeing the fallout outside company walls. 2 industry blogs published short pieces about regulatory disruption at Neuroflux. They didn't mention my name, but the timing was clear. A few clients quietly updated their websites, removing Neuroflux's logo from their Trusted Partners page. I knew what that meant. In biotech, perception is everything. If clients and investors sensed weakness, the company would bleed faster than any internal failure could cause. That evening, Graham called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was lower than usual, stripped of the arrogance he once carried like a badge. "Alice," he began, "I know we didn't always see eye to eye. I know I dismissed your systems more times than I should have. But I'm asking you now, Not as a director, not even as a colleague, just as someone who's watched everything fall apart. Will you help us? I let his words hang in the air. For a moment, I thought of the nights I'd worked late, the weekends I'd sacrificed, the years of giving everything to a company that had shown me so little in return. Graham, I said finally, you don't need me. You need to understand why I mattered in the first place. Until you do, nothing I could do would change what's happening. He tried to argue, but I ended the call. Later, as the city grew quiet outside, I opened my laptop. Not the company one they had taken from me, but my personal machine. I scrolled through job offers I had ignored for years. Smaller firms, rival companies, startups looking for stability. One name stood out. Helix Core. I had spoken to them once at a conference years ago. Back then, I had stayed loyal. Now, loyalty seemed like a relic. Their message was still sitting in my inbox, weeks old. We admire your work. If you're ever ready for a change, our door is open. I read it twice, then began drafting a reply. On Thursday, word reached me that the FDA had officially marked Neuroflux as failed in their inspection. The report cited absence of valid certifying officer and multiple revoked licenses. The consequences were severe. Fines, legal exposure, possible suspension of operations. Jules sent me a screenshot of Callum in the boardroom, face buried in his hands while legal and operations argued across the table. They're finished without you. She wrote simply. For the first time in days, I let myself feel something close to relief. Not satisfaction at their collapse, but relief that I was no longer carrying the weight of keeping them upright. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, darker than I usually liked it. The street below buzzed with life, people hurrying to dinners and late trains. For years, I had been chained to a system that only valued me when it was convenient. Now I realized I was free. The company had underestimated me, erased me, and in doing so, erased themselves. And as I pressed send on the reply to Helix Core, confirming a meeting for the following week, I knew one thing with certainty. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something I should have done a long time ago. By Friday morning, my apartment felt lighter. I'd slept through the night for the first time in months. Helix Core had replied within an hour of my message. A brief call that turned into a 3-hour conversation about risk, process, and how you build a company that doesn't collapse when one person leaves. They didn't ask me for secrets, shortcuts, or access. They asked me how to do it right. We agreed on something simple and clean. A short-term advisory contract starting Monday, pending a full-time offer after references and compliance checks. Realistic, respectful, legal. They sent over paperwork the same afternoon. I read every line and signed. By noon, Neuroflux was everywhere online. Not in headlines, just in the places that matter. Procurement bulletins, vendor forums, regulatory lists. Inspection failed, licenses revoked. Temporary suspension pending remediation. 2 clients publicly announced a pause in partnership pending certification continuity. They didn't name the company, but anyone in our space could read the map. Jules called after lunch. Darren's been reassigned. Project liaison. No clearance. Greg hasn't returned to the floor. Callum fired off an all-staff note about rebuilding our trust with regulators and respecting the expertise that keeps us compliant. You were the subtext of every line. I thanked her and kept my voice steady. How are you holding up? She exhaled. Tired. Angry. But I learned more this week than in 2 years. I'll never treat the quiet parts like background again. That landed. Quiet parts. The ones you notice only when they're gone. At 5, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost let it pass, then answered. Alice, it's Callum. His voice didn't bother with small talk. I'll be direct. We made a mistake. I approved a mistake. We need you to come back, even temporarily. Name your terms. In another life, maybe I would have wanted that sentence. Recognition, urgency, a hand outstretched. But I'd already made peace with leaving. I can't come back, I said. Not as an employee. And not to undo a choice you made on purpose. He was quiet then. Is there any legal way to accelerate reauthorization? No, I said. There's only the way. The same way I did it every year. Training, exams, interviews, registration. Weeks, not days. That's the point. It's supposed to prevent exactly what happened to you. He didn't argue. For what it's worth, he said. I'm sorry. I heard you asked who fired me, I replied. You already know where to aim the apology. He let out a breath that sounded older than he was. Good luck, Alice. You too, I said, and meant it. Not for his sake. He'd survive. But for the people who didn't choose any of this. On Monday, I rode the elevator to Helix Core's 21st floor with a temporary badge clipped to my sweater. No fanfare, no tour, just a neat conference room and a small team waiting with notebooks. Camilla, the junior analyst leading the session, had highlighted half the printout I'd sent over the weekend. She opened with the question I wish someone had asked me years ago. If we had to run tomorrow with 2 people out sick and 1 on leave, what breaks? Good question, I said. Let's build around that. We drew the map that morning. Who holds what authority, where the backups sit, where procedures live, and how they're tested. We wrote contact chains that were actually usable, not just diagrams for slide decks. We documented the boring things, the dates, the renewal windows, the audit prep checklists. And then we spaced responsibility so no single person became a single point of failure. I insisted on one more rule in writing. The person who keeps the company legal will never be the cheapest line on the budget. At lunch, I walked 2 blocks for soup and ate it in the sun. I checked my phone once. A LinkedIn notification had climbed past the point of politeness. I changed my profile line to 4 words. Compliance advisor, Helix Core. No speeches, no thread. Just a fact. By midweek, 2 former clients messaged privately. Short, careful notes about continuity and trust. I reminded them I couldn't discuss Neuroflux and wouldn't. They appreciated that more than any pitch. Respect is a currency, and you spend it slowly. That same afternoon, Jules sent a photo of the Neuroflux lobby. The glossy sign dimmed to a reflection, a clipboard at reception with a visitor log that read the same name 3 times, Regulatory Enforcement Unit. Beneath it, a handwritten note on the guard's desk. No unescorted access to compliance or export areas. It was the right policy. I wish they'd learned it for a different reason. That night, I finally let myself feel everything I'd been moving past. The years, the dismissals, the tiny ways people made a person disappear while still using her work. I cried. Not long, not loudly, but enough. Then I washed my face, made tea, and laid out the next day's agenda. Internal training at 9, draft of Helix's annual audit calendar at 10, a one-on-one with Camilla at 2 to talk about her certification path. On Thursday, Helix's dashboards turned all green for the first time under my watch. Not because we cut corners, but because we didn't. We scheduled the renewals, we assigned backups, we ran a small tabletop drill for, what if the officer of record quits tomorrow? Everyone laughed at the scenario, then did the work anyway. That laugh is the safe kind. The kind that comes with respect, not denial. Friday afternoon, I took the long way home. I passed the old building without stopping. Through the lobby glass, a delivery sat unopened by the security desk, paperwork taped to the side. Hold. No valid certifying officer. It was not revenge. It was gravity. Back in my apartment, the sunset cut a warm line across the bookshelf. I wrote a short note on a sticky and pressed it to the edge of my monitor, the way I always had. In case they forget. The invisible work is the work. I'm not the only one who needs the reminder. Jules texted one last time before the week ended. I'm interviewing next week. Your checklist saved me today. Good, I wrote back. Carry it with you. Make sure the next place earns you. I closed the window, set my phone face down, and let the quiet arrive. Not the silence of being overlooked, but the kind you choose. The world kept moving. So did I. And for the first time in years, I wasn't holding anything together except my own life.